On Mother's Day, in front of 14 relatives. My brother told me I was no longer welcome in the house I'd spent 6 years paying off. He didn't know my phone was already recording, and neither of us knew that our mother had been writing everything down. 40 minutes before that, I was standing at the counter cutting a sheet cake into squares. I knew that kitchen the way you know your own hands. I knew the drawer that swells shut in humid weather. I knew Aunt Pauline won't eat anything with onion in it. So the potato salad at the left end of the table was hers. I knew my mother's pills, the white one at 8, the 2 blue ones at noon, the half tablet at 4 that I split myself. I had been counting those pills for 7 years. Gary drove up from Charlotte that morning. It was the 3rd time he'd been inside that house in 7 years. Sheila came with him, and she carried a leather portfolio, the kind with a zipper that runs around 3 sides. And she set it on the arm of the couch, the way you set down something you intend to open later. I remember thinking that was strange. Nobody brings a briefcase to a cake. A little after 2, Gary tapped a fork against a glass, and the room went quiet the way it does before a toast. He said he wanted to say something about Mom. Then he crossed the living room and handed me a folder. It was a plain manila folder. My name was on a sticky note on the front. In his handwriting, Diane. Inside was a revocation of power of attorney, notarized. Behind it, a petition for guardianship, Montgomery County Probate Court, with the clerk's file stamp already on the corner. I talked for about 4 minutes. He used the word burnout twice. He said I'd been carrying too much for too long and that it had started to affect my judgment. He said, and I'm quoting because I have it on tape, that Mom needed someone stable. While he said it, he was standing in the hall doorway with his hand resting on the grab bar. I put that bar in myself in October of 2020, 3 weeks after Mom slipped out of the tub. I drove to 2 hardware stores looking for the right white. The second was out, so I took the closest thing they had, and it dried a shade cooler than the trim. For 5 years, I looked at that seam every day and thought, one of these days I'll fix it. He leaned on it like it had always been there. I didn't cry. It wasn't strength. My body simply didn't do anything at all. I looked around the room instead. My cousin Ray studied the carpet. Someone's daughter-in-law had picked up a toddler who wasn't crying and was bouncing him anyway, facing the window. My mother sat in her recliner with a paper plate on her knee. She watched Gary's mouth move. I don't think she understood a word of it. She smiled at him, because he was her son and he had come all that way. I said one thing. You filed with the court before you called me. Gary said he hadn't wanted to make it ugly. My right hand was in my cardigan pocket the whole time. I had started the recording when Sheila unzipped that portfolio. 11 minutes before he tapped the fork. I'd like to tell you I had a plan. I didn't. I only knew what a zipper sounds like when it isn't about photographs. I took Mom's house key off my ring and set it on the coffee table next to the cake knife. I did not sign anything. I want to be clear about that, because a great deal turned on it later. I walked out through the kitchen, past the potato salad, and let the screen door close without slamming it. I sat in my car in the driveway for 20 minutes with the engine off. Across the street, a boy was trying to get a kite up in air that had no wind in it. He'd run a few steps, look back, stop, and start again. I opened my phone. I saved the recording. I renamed the file with the date, May 11th, 2025, and waited until the arrow finished uploading it to the cloud. Then I opened the folder on the passenger seat. I hadn't gotten past the first 2 pages inside. Page 3 was a copy of a quitclaim deed, grantor, Ruth E. Kessler, grantee, Gary W. Kessler, recorded March 14th, March. 8 weeks before he stood in my mother's living room and told 14 people I was too tired to think. I sat there with that page on my knees and understood something that took the air out of me. I wasn't walking into an argument. I was walking in after one had already been settled. That's not a plan. That's a receipt. Margot Sandoval's office was on the second floor of a brick building on Far Hills Avenue, above a hearing aid center. I had been inside a lawyer's office maybe 9 times in my life. I witnessed my father's will. I drove a neighbor to a closing. I sat in the back while my parents signed things and nodded when somebody asked if I understood. Every time, I was there for somebody else. This was the first time the chair on my side of the desk was mine. Margot was somewhere in her 50s, with reading glasses pushed up into her hair and a legal pad already turned to a fresh page. She didn't tell me she was sorry. She didn't ask how I was holding up. She said, "Tell me what you paid for," so I told her. "Who's been paying the property taxes?" "Me. Since 2019. Twice a year, out of my checking account." "Who paid off the mortgage?" "Me. There were $41,000 left on it when Dad died. I finished it in 6 years." "Anything else?" "The roof. In 2021, $8,700. The furnace, the winter after that, $5,200. The ramp up to the side door, $2,100, because she couldn't do the step anymore. The bathroom, $6,800, which was the tub and the tile and the bar I put in myself." She wrote it all down without looking up. When I stopped, she added it and turned the pad around so I could see the number, $63,800. I had never once put it together. 7 years of writing checks one at a time, and I had never sat down and made it into a single figure. Seeing it in somebody else's handwriting was like being shown a photograph of yourself from behind. "Was there a note?" she said. "A note. A promissory note. A signed paper saying your mother owed you the money back." I didn't answer. I sat there trying to imagine handing my mother a document across her own kitchen table, and I couldn't get the picture to hold still. "What did you write in the memo line on the checks?" "Nothing. The mortgage payments went as transfers into her account, and the bank pulled from there. It was my mother's house. I didn't write anything." Margot wrote that down too. Has she ever had a formal capacity evaluation? Neuropsych, geriatrics, anything with a date and a signature on it? Her family doctor had written the word decline in her chart in 2019 and adjusted her medication twice. That was it. Nobody ever sat her down at a table and tested her, because I was there every day. And when I was there every day, nobody needed to. I answered every question she asked me. 2 of them I couldn't answer at all. Then she took her glasses out of her hair. "Is your name on the deed?" "No." "Was it ever?" "No." "Did anyone ever offer to put it there?" And that is when the room went quiet, because I remembered. September of 2018, 6 weeks after we buried my father. My mother and I were sitting in a different office, in front of a different lawyer, an older man who had done my parents' paperwork since the 70s. He was going through the estate, and he stopped by the house and asked my mother a very ordinary question. Did she want to add Diane to the deed? Joint tenancy with right of survivorship. It would keep the house out of probate later. It would make everything simpler in the end. My mother turned and looked at me. She didn't say a word. She just looked at me, and she waited. And I understood that whatever I said next was what she was going to do. I said, "That's not necessary. Dad just died. I don't want anybody thinking I'm angling for something." The lawyer nodded and moved on to the next page. I remember the feeling that came over me in that chair, and I want to be honest about it, because it wasn't grief. It was a relief. I was relieved to be the daughter who didn't ask. I had been that daughter my whole life, and I was good at it. And for about 4 seconds in that office, I was proud of myself. 7 years later, I sat in front of Margot Sandoval and heard myself say all of that out loud for the first time. She let it sit. She didn't rush in to make me feel better about it. And I've thought since then that it was a kindness, though it didn't feel like one. "Your brother didn't take your name off that deed, Diane," she said. "You never let anyone put it on." 3 days later, my phone buzzed at 9:12 in the morning. It was Doris Pruitt, who has lived across the street from my mother since 1994. There's a locksmith truck at Ruth's. I read it twice. Then I put the phone face down on the counter at work and finished the crown I was pouring. Because there was nothing else to do with my hands, I did not drive over there. I want to say that plainly, because for about 10 minutes, I wanted to stand in that driveway and let the whole street see me. Instead, I looked up the non-emergency number for the Dayton Police Department and called it on my lunch break. I asked whether an officer could be present while I picked up personal property from a house I no longer had a key to. The woman on the line did not find the question strange. She asked for the address. She asked what I was retrieving. She asked whether there was any court order in place restricting my access. And I said there was a guardianship petition pending, but nothing about me. She said they could do a civil standby, that Thursday at 10 was open, and that there was no charge. I wrote it on the back of a lab slip. Doris came with me. She wore her church coat, and she did not ask a single question the whole drive. The officer was young. His name tag said Petrick. He parked behind me, walked up with us, and stood on the porch with his hands behind his back while I knocked on the door of the house I had let myself into every morning for 7 years. Gary opened it. He looked past me at the uniform. "You called the police? Over some boxes?" "I called a witness." He stood back from the door. My mother wasn't there. Tuesdays and Thursdays, she goes to the Sycamore Adult Day program from 9 until 4. I enrolled her in it in 2022. Gary had kept it going, and I was grateful for that and did not say so. I started in her bedroom. The jewelry box was on the dresser where it has been my entire life. Inside was her wedding ring, which she stopped wearing in 2021 when her knuckles swelled, my grandmother's earrings, small garnets, gold posts worn thin, the brooch she wore to my father's funeral. In the bottom, underneath the felt, a plastic hospital bracelet from 2018 that she had never thrown away. I put the box in a canvas tote. The quilt my grandmother made in 1961 was folded over the back of the recliner. It still smelled like the cedar chest. I took it off the chair and folded it again and carried it out to the car myself. In the hall closet, there were 4 banker's boxes of papers, tax returns, warranties, whatever my mother had put in there over 40 years. I did not open them. I did not look inside a single one. Doris carried one. Officer Petrick carried one when I asked him if he was allowed to, and I made 2 trips for the others. In the kitchen, I took the blood pressure cuff off the counter and the pill splitter out of the drawer by the sink. I bought both of them at the Walgreens on Wilmington Pike. Then I took the 2 mugs out of the cabinet. Sheila was standing by the refrigerator. She said, "That one's Ruth's." "I bought them both," I said. In 2019, I put them in the tote with the jewelry box. 40 minutes. Nobody said another word to me the entire time, and I did not say anything else either. Officer Petrick walked me to the car, told me to have a good day, and got in his cruiser. Doris waited until we were at the stop sign at the end of the block before she said anything. And what she said was that she had a pot roast in and I should come eat. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and opened a spreadsheet. 3 columns, date, amount, what it was for. I started with the property taxes and worked forward. The mortgage transfers, 1 line for every month, the roof, the furnace, the ramp, the bathroom, then the small ones, which I had not thought about in years. The day program copay, the lift chair, the gas card I put in her glove box, the grab bar. It took me until 11:40 at night. When I got to the bottom, I scrolled back up to the top twice, because I kept thinking I had skipped a year. Margot called me on a Tuesday afternoon. I could tell from the first 4 words that she had not called to reassure me. She asked me to confirm how the money moved. I told her again. I transferred from my checking account into my mother's account, and the bank pulled the mortgage payment out of my mother's account on the 1st of the month. The taxes went the same way, the roof and the furnace. I paid the contractors directly, but the invoices were made out to Ruth Kessler because it was Ruth Kessler's house, Margot said. And there's no note. No. And nothing in the memo line. No. Then she explained it to me, slowly. The way you explain something to a person you know is not going to like it. In Ohio, when a child gives money to a parent, the law starts from an assumption. It assumes the money was a gift, not a loan, a gift. If I wanted a court to see it any other way, the burden was on me to prove it. And the proof they want is the kind of proof I never made. A signed note, a repayment schedule, a line of handwriting somewhere that says this is owed. 7 years of transfers into my mother's account looked exactly like a devoted daughter helping her mother. Which is what it was. That was the problem. $63,800. On paper, it did not exist. I sat down on the arm of the couch in a rented apartment with somebody else's carpet in it, and I asked her the only question I had. What about my 7 years? There was a pause on the line, not a long one. Caregiving has no price on paper, Mrs. Kessler, she said. It's the single most unfair thing in the work I do. I thanked her for being honest. I meant it. I hung up and I sat there until the light in the room changed. 9 days after that, a woman from Adult Protective Services left a message asking me to call her back regarding a report concerning Ruth Kessler. My brother had filed it. Financial exploitation of an elder. The allegation was that I had used my power of attorney to move my mother's money for my own benefit. I want you to understand the shape of that. For 7 years, every dollar had gone one direction, out of my account and into hers. He took the exact thing I had done and turned it around and pointed it the other way. And on a form, with boxes and dates, it looked like a case. I called back. I answered every question. I sent bank statements. The investigator was polite and careful and told me nothing. As part of the investigation, her office contacted my employer to verify my employment and income. I had worked at that practice for 22 years. I poured my first crown there when Katie was in the 3rd grade. Dr. Lindemann called me into his office on a Friday, and he could not look at me. And he said that until this was cleared up, he thought it was best if I stepped back. Administrative leave, unpaid. He said he was sure it would be resolved quickly. He shook my hand at the door like I was a patient. Then the phone stopped. That is the part nobody warns you about. Not the accusation, the quiet after it. 3 relatives unfriended me on Facebook inside of a week. And I only noticed because I went looking. My cousin Ray, who had studied the carpet in my mother's living room on Mother's Day, sent me a text message that I have never deleted. Nobody thinks you did it. But you understand, we don't want to get in the middle of it. I did understand. That was the worst part. I understood him completely. The 4 banker's boxes from my mother's hall closet were stacked against the wall by the television, where I had put them the night I brought them home. I looked at them every day for 3 weeks and never once opened one. I assumed they were what closets like that always hold. Warranty booklets, tax returns from the 80s, gas and electric bills from a decade when my father was still alive to complain about them. I did not have it in me to sit on the floor and go through my mother's paper. Katie called from Seattle on a Sunday night. She had heard something from somebody. She asked me straight out how bad it was. I told her it was a misunderstanding and that the lawyer was handling it and that I was fine. I asked about her job. I asked about the apartment. I laughed at something. I lied to my daughter for 11 minutes. And when I hung up, I sat in the dark with the television off and understood. In a way I had not let myself understand before, that I was going to lose. Doris Pruitt knocked on my apartment door on a Saturday morning, holding a coffee cake on a plate covered with a dish towel, and under her arm, a manila envelope gone yellow at the corners. She is 71. She had never once been to my apartment. She had gotten the address off a Christmas card. She put the cake on my counter, sat down at my table without being asked, and slid the envelope across to me. Inside were calendars, the paper kind, the free ones the pharmacy hands out at the register in December, one for every year going back to 2018. On the squares, in ballpoint, in her small tight handwriting, were times: 6:40 in, 9:05 out, 6:35 in, 8:50 out, 6:40 in, 10:20 out, ambulance, false alarm, 6:40 in, 6:55 out, back 7:20 with a prescription, Thanksgiving, 22, 6:15 in, 11:40 out, Christmas Day, 2:21, 6:30 in, did not leave. 7 years of my life, written down by a woman I had waved to from a driveway and never once had a real conversation with. I'm at that window every morning, she said. I have a chair there. I see who comes and goes on this street, and I've never known what to do with myself about it. So I write it down. I wrote down when the Henderson's boy started coming home at 2 in the morning. I wrote down the week your mother's gutters overflowed. I asked her why she kept it. 7 years of it. Boxes of it. She looked past me, out my kitchen window, at a parking lot she had never seen before in her life, and she took a long time. In 2009, my husband died, she said. Harold, we bought that house in 1994. 4 months before he passed, his son from his first marriage took him to a lawyer in Springfield and had a new will drawn up. Harold's signature was on it. It was his signature. I know it was. The house went to the son. I have paid rent to that boy for 16 years, Doris said. To live in my own front room, his lawyer told her that contesting a will costs more than the house was worth and that she would lose anyway. She was 62 years old, and she had no reason on earth not to believe a lawyer. I did not know that. Nobody on that street knows that. Did you fight it? She looked out the window again. I didn't. Back then, I didn't have anybody to call. Then she put 2 fingers on the envelope and pushed it another inch toward me. You do. She stayed for an hour. Before she left, she asked me a question so plainly that I did not have time to build anything around it. She asked whether Gary and I had been close, growing up, and what came back to me was 1985. My father said I was not the college type. He said it at the dinner table, to my mother, not to me. He said high school was plenty for a girl and that I'd be married inside of 3 years anyway. Gary was 19. He was working at the Frigidaire plant. On registration day at Sinclair, he pulled up out front in that brown Cutlass of his and sat there leaning on the horn until I came out. And he drove me downtown, and he paid the $40 fee at the window out of his own paycheck in cash. He said, "Don't listen to him. I read your essay. You write better than I do." I kept the receipt from that window in a jewelry box for 11 years before I finally threw it out. I am 59 years old, and I can still smell the hot vinyl of those seats. That is the thing I have not known how to explain to anybody. Not to Margot, not to Katie, not to a courtroom. People kept asking me how I let it get this far. And the answer is that 40 years ago, my brother was the only person in that house who ever told me I was worth something. And some part of me had been paying him back for it ever since. I told Doris we were close once. She nodded and put her coat on and said the cake was better on the second day. After she left, I sat at the table with those calendars spread out in front of me and read my own life in another woman's handwriting. 6:40. In 9:05 out. She had seen me. For 7 years. Somebody had actually seen me, and I never knew it. It was Doris who made me open them. She came over on a Tuesday with a box cutter in her purse, which was the funniest thing I had seen in 2 months. And she said we'd do it in one sitting and then have lunch. The first box was warranties and manuals, a furnace booklet, instructions for a dishwasher that has not been in that house since 2004. The second box was tax returns, 1987 through 1999, rubber-banded by year. The third box was exactly what I told you it would be: gas bills, electric bills, a stack of canceled checks from a bank that does not exist anymore. The fourth box had my father's fishing license on top, and under it, a green vinyl-covered notebook with a rubber band around it. I knew that notebook before I picked it up. My mother kept one her whole life. The bank on Wayne Avenue used to hand them out free at the teller window, and every time she filled one, she went in and got another. She wrote down what she spent at the Kroger. She wrote down the collection at church. She wrote down what my father lost at Euchre. There were 9 more of them in that box underneath, going back to 1974. I sat down on the kitchen floor with my back against the dishwasher and opened it. The first entries were from 2019. Then I stopped breathing, because it was all there, every single transfer I had made into her account, the date, the amount, and beside each one, in her handwriting, a note: Diane paid. To be paid back from the house, taxes, both halves. Diane, from the house, roof, $8,700. Diane's money, repay from the house, furnace, winter. Diane paid, pay her back, ramp for the side door. Diane, she would not let me give her a check. Bathroom, Diane. This is the 3rd time I am writing it down. 6 years of it, page after page. I watched her handwriting change as I turned them. In 2019, it was the same hand that signed my report cards. By 2021, the letters were bigger and rounder, the way they get when a person is bearing down. In 2023, the lines were running downhill off the ruled edge. The last entry was November of 2023. It took me 4 tries to read it, writing this down so she won't have to prove it. I put the notebook down on the linoleum, and I cried with my hand over my mouth. The way you do in a house where somebody is sleeping. Except there was nobody there. I want to be accurate about this. I did not cry when he handed me that folder in front of 14 people. I did not cry in the driveway. I did not cry when Dr. Lindemann shook my hand at the door. This was the only time. Doris did not touch me and did not say anything. She got up and ran water into the kettle and stood at my sink with her back to me and let me do it. My mother, who could not tell you what year it was. My mother, who a court was about to declare incapable of managing her own affairs. My mother, who will never sit in a witness chair as long as she lives. She had been building my case for 6 years and never once mentioned it to me. That night, I called Katie and told her. I got about 4 sentences in before I couldn't finish, and she waited. And then my daughter said the thing I have not been able to stop hearing since. Mom, you kept everybody's records for 30 years. Grandma kept yours. I drove the notebook to Margot's office the next morning in a Ziploc bag on the passenger seat, like evidence at a crime scene, which I suppose it was. She read for 11 minutes without saying anything. Then she took her glasses off. "This is a contemporaneous record," she said. "It's dated, it's continuous over 6 years. There are no pages torn out, and every entry was made by the person the money went to, which means it's a statement against her own interest, and courts take those seriously." She turned a page and tapped it. "I'll have a document examiner verify the handwriting against her signature cards at the bank. That is what will make it stick." She said it flatly, the way you'd read a weather report. "And it rebuts the gift presumption. This stops being your word about what you meant and starts being her word about what she owed." I asked her what that meant in plain English. Margot said, "It means we're not begging anymore." He texted me on a Wednesday, "Frisch's on Wilmington Pike, Saturday, 8 a.m. Of all the places in Montgomery County, he picked that one. Every Sunday from about 1971 to 1979, my father took us there after early service. Gary got the big boy. I got 2 eggs. My father drank coffee and read the sports page and did not say much, which was the closest thing to affection he had. That vinyl booth by the window is one of maybe 4 things I remember clearly from being 8 years old. I sat in my car in that parking lot for 6 minutes before I went in. Margot had given me the statute number the week before, and I had written it on the back of the same lab slip. Ohio Revised Code 2933.2. In this state, if you are part of the conversation, you are allowed to record it. You do not have to tell the other person. I started the recorder, put the phone in my coat pocket face down, and went inside. They have redone the inside twice since 1979, but the booths are still in the same places. He was sitting in ours. He was already in the booth. He had lost weight, not the good kind. His collar stood off his neck, and there was a gray cast under his eyes that I had not seen on him since our father died. The waitress came, and he ordered for both of us before I opened my mouth. 2 eggs over medium, wheat toast, no onions in the potatoes. He remembered, 50 years later, sitting across from a sister he had accused of stealing from their mother. He remembered that I don't eat onions. I have thought about that more than almost anything else in this whole business. He talked about Charlotte for a while. He asked about Katie. He said Sheila sent her regards, which I doubted. Then he put an envelope on the table and slid it halfway across. $15,000. In exchange, I would withdraw my objection to the guardianship, drop any claim against the house, and not appear in probate court. He said it was clean. He said it was more than I'd get after lawyers. He said he had thought about it a long time. I did not touch the envelope. And then he leaned in over his coffee, and he lowered his voice, and he said the thing. "Mom doesn't know. She doesn't know either way. She hasn't known for 2 years. Sign it. We split it, and nobody has to sit and look at each other in a courtroom." I sat there with my hands in my lap. I did not tell him about the notebook. I did not tell him what our mother had written in November of 2023, with her handwriting running off the edge of the line. I did not say one word in her defense. And I want to be honest that this was not restraint. It was arithmetic. I asked him one question. Why are you in such a hurry? He picked up his coffee. He put it back down without drinking any of it. He looked out the window at the parking lot for what felt like a long time. He never answered me. The waitress brought the check and he paid it, and out in the lot he hugged me. And I let him. And he said, "Just think about it." I got in my car and drove 2 blocks and pulled into a bank parking lot and saved the file. That night, I was at my kitchen table going through the invoice folder because Margot wanted every receipt with a date on it. The Sycamore Day program bills me monthly. They itemize. Every day my mother attends is a line because the copay is charged per day, and I have been paying that copay since 2022. I found the invoice for March, then I saw it, and I put my pen down. March 14. I attended. March 14th was the date recorded on the quitclaim deed. I called Sycamore on Monday morning and asked for the daily sign-in sheet. The woman emailed it that afternoon without any trouble at all, because I was still listed as the responsible party on the account. Ruth E. Kessler, signed in 9/15. A. and M. Signed out 340p. MMM, staff initials in both columns, and at the bottom of the page, a note in the policy footer stating that the entrance is under continuous video recording. I pulled up the copy of the deed from that manila folder. The notary block was filled out in blue ink. Sworn and acknowledged before me this 14th day of March, 11:20 a.m. at 1140 Harmon Avenue. My mother was sitting in a room on Wilmington Pike doing chair exercises at 11:20 in the morning on the 14th of March. She cannot be in 2 places. Neither can a signature. I printed that page 3 times. Then I sat in my kitchen until it got light. The guardianship hearing was on a Thursday morning in Montgomery County Probate Court, room 209. I had not asked anybody to come. Katie flew in from Seattle on a red-eye, took a taxi from the airport straight downtown, and was sitting on the bench outside room 209 with her coat still on when I came around the corner. Doris was next to her. They had never met. They were talking like they had known each other for years. I want you to hold that against Mother's Day for a second. 14 relatives in that living room, and every one of them found something to look at. 2 people came to a courthouse on Thursday. Gary went first. He was good. I have to say that. Hy talked about caregiver burnout, and he used my name gently every time, the way you talk about somebody you're worried about. He said the strain of 7 years had understandably affected my judgment. He said our mother deserved a professional environment with trained staff and proper oversight. He said he had put off doing anything for a long time because he loved his sister, and that a person eventually has to do the right thing even when it costs him. 2 of Sheila's relatives were in the 3rd row. One of them nodded. Then Margot stood up. She started with the notebook. She handed the judge my mother's green ledger and the report from the document examiner who had compared it against 9 signature cards from the bank on Wayne Avenue, going back to 1974. Same hand, 6 years of dated entries, no pages removed. She read 4 of them out loud. She read the last one, writing this down so she won't have to prove it. Nobody in that room made a sound. Then she submitted Doris Pruitt's sworn affidavit and 7 years of pharmacy wall calendars, marked in ballpoint, times in, time out, Christmas Day, 2021, did not leave. Then the sycamore sign-in sheet for March 14th, with staff initials in both columns, alongside a certified copy of the notary's journal showing an acknowledgement taken at 1140 Harmon Avenue at 11:20 that morning. The judge looked at the two documents for a long time. Then Margot asked to play a recording. Gary's lawyer objected. The judge asked what state the conversation occurred in. Ohio. Was Ms. Kessler a party to it? She was overruled, and my brother's voice came out of a laptop speaker into a courtroom. Mom doesn't know. She doesn't know either way. I did not watch him while it played. I watched the back of Katie's hand on the bench in front of her. Then Margot said she had one more exhibit. An exclusive right-to-sell listing agreement for 1140 Harmon Avenue, executed by Sheila Kessler, licensed agent, signed and dated March 2nd, 12 days before the deed. They had listed my mother's house for sale before they owned it. The judge took his glasses off and asked Gary to come back to the podium. And then he asked him one question in a very flat voice. The way Margot says things, why the hurry? The same question I had asked him in a booth at Frisch's over eggs he ordered for me. He hadn't answered me either. He answered the judge. 11 months earlier, there had been a shortfall in his advisory practice in Charlotte. He had been covering client withdrawals out of his own operating account, and then out of a line of credit, and then out of a personal loan from a lender in Matthews with a personal guarantee attached and the proceeds of a property sale pledged against it. $200,000, due in the fall. He said the words fell out of him. He was not composed anymore. At one point he said, "I was going to put it back." And that is when I understood the thing that has stayed with me longest. My brother is not greedy. My brother was terrified. He had gotten himself into a hole he could not climb out of. And when he looked around for something to throw in it, he chose our mother's house and he chose me. Because we were the two things in his life that had never once said no to him. Sheila got up and left before it was over. She was in the hallway when the doors opened, on her phone, and her voice carried far enough that Katie and Doris and I all heard the same sentence. "You told me she'd sign it. You told me it was a formality." Gary did not go after her. He sat at that table by himself with both hands flat on his folder, looking at nothing. The two relatives in the third row put their coats on and went out the other door. The petition for guardianship was denied. I was appointed my mother's guardian. The deed was a separate case in common pleas. But everything had already come out in that room, and it was set aside for fraud and undue influence. Adult Protective Services closed its report as unsubstantiated. Dr. Lindemann called me himself. I went back to work with 11 weeks of back pay. Margot filed a defamation claim over the email Gary had sent to 14 relatives. It settled. Part of the settlement was a written retraction sent to that same list, every name on it. And I collected $63,800 plus interest, secured against the house by an equitable lien. All of it, every dollar I put in. I took back out, not 1 cent more than that, not 1 cent less. My mother never went into a facility. I gave up the apartment and moved into 1140 Harmon Avenue in August, into my old room, with my grandmother's quilt on the bed and both mugs back in the cabinet. And I hired help. A woman named Alma came 4 days a week from 8 to 4, and I paid her out of the money the court gave back to me. 7 years I had told myself we could not afford that. What I meant was that I had not been willing to spend my own money on my own rest, because some part of me still believed that if I ever stopped, it would mean I hadn't loved her enough. I got 15 months of sitting with my mother instead of managing her. There was an afternoon in October. She was in the recliner by the lamp and I was folding towels, and she reached over and took my wrist, and she said my name, not honey, not the name of her sister, which is what she usually said. Diane, she said. Did you get the notebook? I said I did. She nodded once, the way she used to when I told her the bill was paid, and closed her eyes, and went to sleep. That was the last time she was there. She died at home 10 months later, in July, in her own bed, in a house that was hers on paper right up until the end. Gary came for the funeral and gave the eulogy. He talked about her patience. He talked about family. He told the story about Sunday mornings at Frisch's, and he told it well because he has always told things well. Nobody interrupted him. Nobody needed to. I looked around that room while he spoke and saw something I had not expected and did not enjoy. People were being polite. That was all. They listened to my brother the way you listen to a guest at somebody else's funeral. And when he finished, they said the correct things to him and then walked over to me. Doris sat on my left. Katie sat on my right. Neither of them looked at him once. He didn't lose the house. He lost the right to be believed. 3 weeks later, I went to Margot's office to sign the last of the probate paperwork. There was a woman in the waiting room, maybe 35, holding a shoebox on her lap with both arms around it. It was full of receipts. Her hands were not steady. I asked her if she was all right. She said she'd been taking care of her father for 4 years, and her brother had called her Tuesday night. I sat down in the chair beside her. Have you been writing any of it down? She shook her head. She said she never thought she'd need to. She said it like she was apologizing to somebody. I have carried a small notebook in my purse since the morning I sat in that driveway with a folder on my knees. I took it out and tore off a page and wrote Margot's name on it, and the phone number underneath. Start today, I said, and you've got somebody to call. She looked at the paper for a second, and then she looked at me, and I saw her put her shoulders down about an inch. Boundaries aren't something you reach for after someone has already hurt you. They're something you write down first. If you've ever been the one who stayed, the one who drove over every morning, counted the pills, paid the bill nobody talked about, I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments, what's the one thing you wish you'd written down? And tell me where you're listening from tonight. I read every single one of these. And last week, we had people from Ohio, Quebec, the Philippines, and South Africa all in the same comment section. If this story meant something to you, subscribe. New stories every week about the people who kept the receipts.